Tristan! Tristan!
Hey Shane.
What are you doing?
Mods.
Mate. Okay. Look, I know it's going to be hard for you to hear this, mate, but I think the camera's done.
What do you mean?
I think you've had your fun. You've gotten all your silly shenanigans out of the way. You know, we've turbocharged the camera and it was so much fun.
Yes, but brilliant.
Mate, V12 Supra.
Oh yeah, what about it?
How about we get back to work on it?
What for?
Well, put my foot down.
Just one more mod.
No, I'm putting my foot down, mate. It's Supra time. We came to do the Supra. We've gotten all the bits and pieces. It's time to get back to it, mate.
All right. The Supra. Keep your hands off the glass.
Mate, it's fine.
I spent ages making that clean, like a year ago. So where were we even up to with this thing, Shane? I forget.
We couldn't get it. We couldn't get the angle right because we had to do the pan
thing. Right. Yeah, that's right. So the engine was on the wrong angle. We couldn't get it any lower because the steering rack was in the way, and we couldn't get the gearbox any higher because there's a car in the way of the gearbox. Right, we've got to get this thing up in the air and figure out removing that lower subsection.
Oh, giddy up.
So what we're going to do is we're going to get the gearbox angle to sort of match the diff angle in a way, right?
Yeah.
But there's no diff. Last time we worked on this car, there was a diff.
There was.
But my staff needed a diff for a racing event and they kind of stole it. But it is on the ground here, they gave it back. So first things first, we're going to stick the diff back in so we can take some measurements. Yuck.
Yeah,
So greasy.
That's why you want some gloves, mate.
In, that way.
Not me.
It won't get off. Oh, it's like cleaning my balls. Get off. This yeah, it's towards that. Okay, it's threaded. Oh, that probably goes in from above, then drops down.
Oh, look at that.
I'm going to get a little bit cheaty here. Instead of taking the engine out of the car to take the sump off, we've got a little device over here which can hold the engine in its place while we take the mounts and frame and everything out the way, so we can remove that sump, put everything back, and the engine will have never left the bay. There it is. On the body, just inside the fender. while we wait for Dan to get back with the clamp to hold onto this, you can see engine's just floating there, mounts and everything just being held up by the chain from above. It's a really nice way to work on things, even if it is a little bit nerve-wracking to have that much weight and nothing underneath stopping it from falling down. You know, it's a big chain. Nope.
We're going this over here.
Oh, anyway, that's
On the forklift.
yeah. I'm just going to get the engine mounts out of the way now, because that's how we're going to drop the engine lower without actually redesigning anything, just to test the angle. We'll just take these mounts out the way and let it relax so that the brackets come all the way down into the cross member. Oop. Catch?
Yep.
Maybe halt.
Hey.
This is already a pretty cool looking sump. Look at that. We've got all these guide channels sort of guiding the oil down back into the pan. I guess that's a good thing. Whatever. And it's great to finally get a look inside this bottom end as well, seeing these 6-bolt mains and everything. It's tough looking bottom end. Just needs some much fatter rods and some forged pistons. But we'll get to that later. We've got a guide pin in between there. That's a guide where it's meant to be. Yeah. Much further back. Much further back. Okay, that's enough matches. Thank you very much. Alright, you can see now we've got heaps of room. Before, the sump was just millimetres off touching the steering rack. We'd put it as low as we could get it. Now, I can fit my fist through the gap, so we've got a lot more room to work with. Nothing else is in the way, so we will drop this engine down and see how much the angle improves. Keeping in mind, we do actually have to make a new sump for this, so we have to leave some room between the engine block and the steering rack. We can't just have nothing there or we'll have some oil control problems. I.e. all the oil will just fall on the floor, yeah. Right. And already, I think, I'm 2 fingers off the steering rack and I'm 2.5 fingers off the engine mount, so we're going to have to chop those engine mounts up temporarily with something to sort of simulate the new angle. But you can see straight away, like, look at that engine, it's clearly heaps lower in the bay, we've got a lot more room for stuff, and it's definitely on a better angle, so looking good. Alright, so I found some, what you call it, drift engine mount material here. I'll just cut a couple of blocks off, it's about the thickness I think we need, and see how that all works out. Now before we go mounting this engine solidly and, you know, going through the drama of making new engine mount brackets and getting it all bolted up, there's one thing we have to figure out, and that's the oil pump, because right now this factory oil pump cannot work. It's got a pickup that comes out the back of it that usually picks up around here, and there's all sorts of stuff in the way. So what I want to do is get another oil pump which feeds in the side, like in one side, out the other side, instead of in the back where the steering rack is, and that will package a lot nicer into this little spot we've got. But first, I need to decide what pump that's going to be, and I need to make sure I leave enough room for it with whatever engine mounts we create. And before I can even decide which pump we need to get, we need to take this one off, disassemble it, and have a look at what volume this pump can move, because we need to make sure whatever we buy to replace it can push the same oil pressure and the same oil volume to keep this engine happy and in one piece. So, pump off, next step. Like that. Now it really does suck that Toyota decided to put the oil pump in the sump. I haven't really seen this sort of setup since the 7M engine, and we all know what I think of 7Ms. But for some reason they thought it'd be a good idea on the V12. I'm guessing, see a 2JZ and a 3S and everything, they have the oil pump on the front, usually behind the harmonic balancer. But this was already a very long engine, it's longer than a JZ, so maybe they thought, well, we'll take it out from there and put it underneath just for packaging reasons. Okay. One V12 oil pump. It's pretty big. It's maybe even worth considering going back on something that I said I wouldn't do. I said I would not run an external oil pump on this thing. I was dead against having to do that. But, you know, to keep an oil pump in the sump in this, we are making a lot of compromises. And we could avoid all of those compromises if we just made one other compromise instead, and that is an external oil pump. So we'll have a really good think about having an oil pump outside the sump here and modifying the crank pulley to drive it like a dry sump pump, but still going back and picking up off a wet sump pickup. Because ultimately, I still think this car, as a road car, should run a wet oil system.
Maybe it'll just be a damp oil system.
That's getting edited out. Moist.
I've coined it. You heard it here first. It's a damp oil system.
It's not quite wet sump, it's not quite dry sump. It's damp.
Damp. It's a damn good idea.
Damp good idea.
Oil pump.
Oil pump.
What's in it?
Oil.
Well, that was good then.
Okay, Shane, we've got the oil pump out of the car, and what we want to do is disassemble it and see what volume of oil this thing can pump, because in replacing it with an aftermarket pump, we need to make sure that the one we put in there is at least as good as this one. So we'll pull it apart and take some measurements. So far, I think I've figured out the right way because it seems to be coming into two pieces. Is that it? Hey, there we go. Okay. Let's try not to mix any of these things up. We'll put that bolt back where it came from. It actually looks a lot like a 3S GTE pump. You'd recognise that from your own car. It's a similar sort of rotor setup. But one thing I'm noticing straight away is the height of this rotor is huge.
Oh wow.
Absolutely huge. The 3S GTE, I'd say even the bigger versions of it are barely half the size of that. So pretty big, but you know, that's what you expect. This is, compared to the 3S GTE, it's pretty much two motors. It's got two cylinder heads, it's got two VVT mechanisms, it's got a hell of a lot of cylinders, so yeah, it's pretty logical.
Tris.
Yeah.
So, the engine position, you've been looking at this on and off for about a week now. Looks good to me, but, I mean, are we there?
Well, after I make these parts, the engine mounts and the sump and everything, that's it. That is going to put the engine in that spot forever. It's never going to move. I'd have to remake all of that from scratch if I ever wanted to move it. So I adjusted the transmission height and adjusted the engine height a lot and got it to the point where the engine angle and the diff pinion angle are parallel to each other, which is exactly what we want. They've got equal angles in the tail shaft. Everything's mint there. But the engine is sitting just a little bit forward of where a 2JZ would normally sit in this car. And I kind of want this to handle as well as it can be, which means getting the weight as far back as it can be. And that means just giving it a little bit of a shuffle backwards. The problem is that is going to take a lot of work. We need to chop out this temporary cross member for the gearbox to allow it to come back. We're going to have to take the gearbox out to modify the tunnel where I've cut those holes just a little bit more, just to allow it to come back just a little bit more on that side. And then come up with a new way of holding the engine in this position, because right now I've got some very sophisticated 30mm blocks of pine and they're not going to work. When I shift it back, the engine mount's no longer going to, the bracket for the engine mount's no longer going to line up with the cross member, so it'll all just sort of tumble over. So I think we're going to have to cut up some bits of steel just to support the underside of the block to the frame, which will also allow us to get that exotic pine out of the way, and we can get to work on doing those proper engine mount brackets and have this thing suspended. But it looks like we're going to have to take about 5 steps backwards right now to get the engine where I want it.
Well, looking at it, it's not, I mean, we're not looking at an engine clearance issue because we've got heaps of space there.
Oh yeah, there's heaps of space to the firewall. There's not much stopping us aside from that little bit in the tunnel. It will be happy sitting back a little bit further. Sure, I'll pop straight off with him.
Anything goes.
Just depends on how big your hammer is, right?
Yeah, off with 2 ends.
That's the biggest hammer. Okay, here we go. Just going to put a hole in the side of the gearbox.
So you don't need to modify the tunnel.
You remember this hammer from episode 4 when I told Shane to not be stupid. I barely missed it.
Here, would you like a Tristan size hammer?
It's too big.
All along. Where that gap was really big when I walked away, then I came back and the gap was small again.
Optical illusion.
There you go. Okay, you ready?
Here we go. Find out. I don't know who's got it. It's trying to roll.
You've got it, Norbert.
Bang.
Okay, I'm letting go of it now. You hold on to it so I can clear the bench.
Okay.
Got it?
Right. We both walk away.
Yep. Nope.
It's easy.
So as you would have seen before, we're using just an old Supra cross member as a dummy cross member to fit this one. We don't want to go manufacture or fabricate something only to change the position and have to make a new one. I've cut precisely that much out of it to allow the gearbox to shift, well, that much further back. I didn't actually measure. I'm just sort of winging it. maybe we'll measure it now just to see how much it's going to shift. 27.5 mil. Don't make noise for 30 seconds.
Just wait for 30 seconds.
Oh. Yes, just wait for 30 seconds.
Yeah, you wait for 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's what I said. Wait for 30 seconds.
Yeah, you.
No, you.
Who's running this show?
It's been 30 seconds of you not listening. All right, she's about 27.5 millimeters, which is great because when you take into account the thickness of the cutting disc I use, that is pretty damn close to 30 mil, and 30 millimeters is precisely how much further forward this engine was compared to a 2JZ in its natural position. So with this removed and the gearbox moved as far back as it goes into that dummy cross member, we will have the engine in a very natural position. Okay, we've got the engine back a good 30 millimeters, fixed some problems, but some new ones. There's two tabs on the back of the gearbox here that we need to do something about because they're now touching the side of the tunnel. One of them is really easy, it's just a wiring harness tab. We'll unbolt that and that'll be gone. The other one is just, well, actually it's just a little bit of cast aluminium that holds a wiring harness for, you know, a clip to go into. So we'll just cut that bugger off, and that's sorted. Rest of the trans clears the tunnel everywhere, and the engine is now central and shifted back. It all worked out really well, actually. That's good. Shane, how good is it to be back onto this Supra?
So good, it really is. Look folks, thank you so much for your patience while we got the whole Camry thing out of the way. It was a lot of fun, but you know, back on the Supra again.
Yeah, we promise the Supra is now our top priority, nothing else. Supra V12 turbos, that's it, that's what we're doing from now on.
That's it, and it has to be it because I had that stupid Camry crushed.
You're
So anyway, Episode 6.
Episode 6, it's going to be amazing. We are making some awesome parts for this car. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but rest assured, this is going to be the best episode yet.
And with that, we better get back to work.
Catch you later, guys.